Well, hello everyone, and good morning on this beautiful fall Sunday here at St. Bart's in New York City. And welcome to the Forum, where each week we host sacred conversations about the things that matter. My name is the Reverend Zach Nyain. I serve as Senior Associate Rector here at St. Bart's, and today I'm delighted to welcome a familiar face to the congregation, if you've been around for a while, Steve Ross. Steve and his wife Julie have faithfully and stalwartly led our youth group for around 30 years here at St. Bart's. And in addition to leading the youth group, they have many talents. And so this is Steve Ross's biography from the Church Publishing Company website. It says that Steve Ross began his professional career as a teenager in San Antonio, selling pictures of angst-ridden, dark and disturbing surrealist art to his friends and teachers. After high school, he landed a job drawing pictures of dining room tables for a local furniture company and was surprised when the owner became upset that he was drawing dark and disturbing surrealist furniture for the company's newspaper ads. They parted company, and Steve now works as a professional illustrator who resides here in New York City. And so in 2005, he published the book that is our topic for today called Marked, a graphic novel interpretation of the Gospel of Mark, quite appropriate for this year B of the lectionary we find ourselves in, which if you've been paying attention throughout the year, liturgical year, we've been reading through the Gospel of Mark. So Steve's going to present a little bit, but first I wanted to share that in the amazing smallness of the Episcopal Church and the beautiful connectivity of the Holy Spirit, I actually met Steve when I was 15 years old and attending the Episcopal Youth Event in Berea, Kentucky in 2005, right when this book was being released. And it was the hottest thing in youth ministry at the time. And so Steve had his booth with, I don't know who sponsored it, but they were giving out free copies of Marked, all kinds of swag. I vividly remember the dark and surrealist T-shirt of Marked that was given to me, and I remember chatting with Steve and just being so taken by this charming fellow here. And who knew that all these years later, well, here we are. So please join me in officially welcoming Steve Ross.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me? Is this good? Do we have a good sound check here? Okay, great. Before we start, you may have noticed there's like pens and paper on your every table. I'm one of those people who has a real hard time focusing unless I'm drawing. So if there are any of like people out there, feel free to start drawing. If some of you are more like assignments, the assignment is, if you choose to do it, draw a picture of Jesus. Now, I know that sounds a little corny and Sunday school-ish, but we will come back to it because it's actually very important, if you want to. If you just want to doodle, God bless you, go for it. My name is Steve Ross. I am an illustrator. Like Zach said, this came out about 20 years ago, so the opportunity to talk about this again is a real privilege. It's like getting into a time machine and going back in time. So I'm really very, very pleased that you all are getting in the Wayback Machine with me to go do this. So as I mentioned, I am an illustrator. I've done my share of religious illustration, some of it satirical, a lot of it satirical. Dark and disturbing surrealist art is kind of correct. Some of it very personal, if a little subversive. I did a series on Mary and the baby Jesus. Some of it very political. An important distinction between artists and illustrators is that, with few exceptions, artists are not usually under the pressure of deadlines. Illustrators, on the other hand, are always getting very tense phone calls from publishers and art directors going, "So how's it going?" This distinction is important because when I first pitched a graphic novel based on the Gospel of Mark to the good people at Church Publishing, and I want to just make sure you understand, it's this Church Publishing, the people who publish the Book of Common Prayer. So I pitched this to these people. I was pretty sure that it was going to be a cakewalk. The late Ken Arnold, who was then vice president at Church Publishing, wanted to take advantage of this exploding popularity of comic books and graphic novels, and he had this idea for a Bible-based graphic novel, and had promised his board to deliver a product in 10 months. He called me in. I readily agreed. I mean, how hard could it be? So I got the gig. I signed the contract, and I skipped merrily over to the Starbucks and ordered a big latte and sat down and opened my copy of the RSV. And I thought this would be a smash and grab. But about 40 minutes later, it's a short read, by the way, I put my RSV down and realized that I was in a lot of trouble. Like the majority of Episcopalians, I hadn't read Mark. 70% of Episcopalians have not read the Bible, which is, I think, kind of telling. So I read Mark for the first time, sitting in that Starbucks. And I don't know how to put this delicately. It's weird. It's a very, very weird book. There's no birth story. None. There's no resurrection. There's no resurrection. There are demons. And more demons. And more demons. And to top it all off, there are possessed pigs. And demonic pigs that throw themselves into the sea and drown. Yeah, right? And Jesus himself isn't the milquetoast that I had assumed. He gets angry, he gets confused, he makes a lot of false starts. But what really hit home for me is his disgust at the racism, xenophobia, and sexism that disguises itself as religious piety. And that really resonated with me because not much has changed in 2,000 years. And so this brings up what I was talking about earlier about the difference between being an illustrator and an artist. 10 months is a really tight deadline. But on the other hand, it had become personal to me. So I cleared my calendar, I turned down other work, and I made an important stylistic decision that I was going to lean into the weirdness instead of back away from it. And so basically, instead of a mainstream Marvel comic, I was going to do something very underground like R. Crumb. And cross my fingers and hope that the good people at Church Publishing did not tear up my contract. So I'm in my studio, it's day one, and I'm already stumped. Because, well, and this relates to what you guys are drawing, what will Jesus look like? That question opened up a can of worms. I grew up in the 60s in Texas, the South. The vibe there was very conservative, fundamentalist, and openly racist. This is the picture I grew up with. White, blonde, blue-eyed. As a teenager, I hated this guy, which is unfortunate because I fell into the oldest tricks, one of the oldest tricks of the propagandist playbook, which is I conflated the image of a thing with the thing in itself. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, a little art history. This is a really great painting by the French surrealist René Magritte. The title of the painting is called The Treachery of Images. Who speaks French? Anyone? Okay, what does this say? This isn't a pipe. what is he talking about? It's not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe. And that's really important because if this is not a pipe, this isn't a Savior. This is a picture of a Savior. I'm going to go on a limb here. Every visual, artistic representation of Jesus is an attempt by the artist to express an emotion or a thought and to convey that emotion or thought convincingly to an audience. In short, every visual depiction of Jesus is somewhere on a propaganda spectrum. From overtly malignant to, relatively benign, hunky Jesus. Again, if you can, I say relatively benign if you have the privilege to ignore the implicit racism in this picture. Now, I'm not so cynical as to say that all art is manipulative, but every artist is trying to evoke a feeling or a thought, even if it's just in the artist in themselves. I'm not trying to scare anyone, and I'm not saying that we all have to stop looking at pictures of Jesus, or as some of you have done, stop making pictures of Jesus. What I'm saying is that images are extremely powerful, and they get in under our cognitive radar, and we should all try to become educated consumers of images and be sensitive to what is being said, both explicitly and implicitly. So, I'm in my studio. What is my point of view? What does Jesus represent to me, and how can I effectively convey that through a drawing? 20 years ago, Google Images was not as robust as it is today. So I actually spent a lot of time in a library. Some of the younger kids don't know what that is, but I actually spent a lot of time in libraries looking up what other artists have done. And I waded through probably 1 million pictures of white dudes in Greek robes, and until I came across this representation. It's by a British sculptor named Mark Wallinger, and it's called Ecce Homo. To me, this depiction captures that gray area between being human and being divine. And it embodies that liminal space between me, us, and them. This sculpture gave me my hook. As I mentioned earlier, Mark has no birth story. There is no manger, there are no wise men, there's no star, but in true superhero tradition, there is an origin story. We first meet Jesus. When we first meet him, he's cloaked in anonymity. He's a construction worker working on a Roman condominium, and he hears about John the Baptist through a disembodied voice. Is it a radio? Is it God? We don't know. But in either case, something undefinable drives him to meet John at the Jordan River. So he runs, gets in line. Now, it's not an exaggeration to say that the baptism doesn't go quite as planned. John, bless his heart, freaks out and gives Jesus an atomic drop for a baptism. An atomic drop is a wrestling move where you take your opponent overhead, slam them. And unfortunately, Jesus doesn't know how to swim. Which I kind of thought was interesting because we take baptisms for granted, but what if baptisms were actually dangerous? Would we bring our kids to baptism just, oh, this is so much fun? What if it was dangerous? Because it kind of is. We're making a promise for them that's kind of tall. It's not, granted, it's a joke, but it's also like, what's going on? So then something very supernatural occurs. The heavens open up, and Jesus gets swept away from certain death by a monstrous dove. I mean, God is big, right? Baptism is considered a sacrament, right? Does anyone have a pithy kind of shorthand description of what a sacrament is? Anybody? Bueller? No, okay.
He went to Catholic school.
It's an outward and visible sign of somebody knows it. Okay, it's an outward and visible sign of an invisible and spiritual reality. So the challenge for me as an artist is, how do I represent something that's invisible? Luckily, a lot of comic artists have solved this problem. Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider. He achieves superhuman powers, but how do you visually show that change? He puts on Spider-Man costume. Now you have a visual hook. Dr. Bruce Banner, exposed to a lethal amount of radiation, but instead of dying, he achieves superpowers. How do you show that? He becomes the Hulk. Jesus survives a near-death experience and is radically changed. But how do I show this? So, Jesus goes home, sheds his old life, goes to the bathroom, cuts off his hair, shaves off his beard, and becomes something new, something we don't expect. He becomes an other. People gossip. Is that Joseph and Mary's kid? What happened? He got weird. I wanted to depict a surprising Jesus, a strange Jesus. In fact, a Jesus that we may not actually trust at first. So Jesus is now aware that something has changed in him at the molecular level. But someone else is aware of something that's happened to him. After Jesus is transformed by his baptism, we find him immediately in the desert discussing a potential future with who else but the devil, who I saw as kind of a chauffeured celebrity sports agent, offering Jesus the world. Literally, he's offering Jesus the world if he would just sign the contract. And Jesus declines, naturally. But I don't think this was an easy decision. Because when the devil drives off in his limo, Jesus is confronted with the reality of, now what? I mean, how many of us graduated college with absolutely no idea what's next? So the devil tells Jesus, have your people call my people. This plants the seed. Jesus begins to go, who are my people? I need people. So Jesus starts his ministry not as a teacher, but as a searcher. He starts looking for people. He becomes a fisher of people. He runs across, he randomly meets the fisherman Simon, who's staggering under the weight of a dead-end job with no prospects. And Simon, like all of us, is naturally suspicious of Jesus. But Jesus offers him something that's worth the risk. His true name. His real name, we know this because we read it, but his real name is Peter, not Simon. But everyone calls him Simon. But Jesus sees through it and goes, I know who you actually are. Follow me, and everyone will call you by your real name, not that other name. So he leaves Zeb alone, and that's the start of Jesus' ministry with Peter. Now, I think we have enough time for me to do one more thing. We're going to do bookends. That's sort of the beginning of the book. The end of the book got a lot of flack. As I said before, there is no resurrection story in Mark. And this is the first picture this first sketch I did of the angel in the tomb. Pretty traditional, but I realized that to have taken my reader on such a strange journey, to end this way seemed like a cop-out. So I looked again at what was actually written. Mary learns from Joseph of Arimathea. She learns of her son's state-sanctioned murder and gathers up his only good suit to go bury him in. She makes a very lonely Easter morning trip to the tomb. She approaches the tomb, but something isn't right. The tomb of her dead son has been defiled. It's been trashed. Can you imagine what she was feeling? She's at her lowest point, and something makes it even worse. Mary discovers two women who had taken upon themselves to prepare Jesus' body for a proper burial, crouching in terror. And when Mary asks who broke in, they have one of my favorite lines in the whole book. You don't understand. No one broke in. Something broke out. Now that's a line straight out of a horror movie, right? No, nothing broke in. Something broke out. This isn't a typical joyous Easter morning that I'm used to. These women are terrified. So they got me thinking about the cognitive dissonance. Something that is supposedly joyous and happy is actually terrifying. Can anyone think of something that is simultaneously joyful and happy and terrifying? Yeah. Well done. Yes, that is correct. This got a lot of flack. People were like, what? Which is exactly the reaction I was looking for. The tomb is this locus of where everything you know is wrong. Death is not the end. But this isn't just like a party clown. This is like a commedia clown, like Pulcinella, who's an agent of both honesty and chaos. If you've ever seen a commedia show, this character just trashes everything, but never lies. So he folds up the shroud like a flag and gives it to the grieving mother. The women leave, still afraid, not sure what the future holds. But even though technically there isn't a resurrection in Mark, the final image that I put in is a resurrection of sorts. Throughout the whole book, ravens have appeared. I don't know if you've noticed them in some of the other drawings. Ravens appear as agents of death. But the final image is a sunflower growing out of the dead carcass of a raven. A sunflower rising out of the remnants of death. And I made it in under 30 minutes. Stunned. Everyone's stunned.
We are stunned. Thank you so much, Steve. I collected about 10 or 12 sermons just from your presentation. So if any of you in the room have questions, Judy there in the back would love to collect them on the question cards. And if you are tuning in from home or elsewhere, you can email your questions to me at znyin@stbarts.org, STBARTS. Or you can drop them in the YouTube chat comments. We would be happy to take them.
Also, I don't know if people know how comics are made. Nowadays, they're all done digitally, but 20 years ago, it was pen and ink. The word balloons are then put in later by a letterer, but this is old school. This is how and yes, it was big and then shrunk down so that you can get detail.
That's original?
Yeah, these are the originals. Yeah, if you want to take a look, yeah. I'm going to pass those around. Also, because I'm really very grateful for all of you, there's a stack of original concept art. I would love for you guys to take whatever you want. I'll sign anything in true Comic-Con fashion. Sell it on eBay. You might get 50 cents.
Thanks so much, Steve. And we actually are selling books in the back afterwards. Steve created not only Marked, based on the Gospel of Mark, but also Blinded, based on the adventures of St. Paul the Apostle and the Acts of the Apostles. So both of those are for sale. Last spring, the youth group was going through Marked, and it was like a collector's edition. The church publishing was all sold out, and so we had to buy from used bookstores on Amazon from all over the country and get them shipped in. Now, church publishing has renewed the printing, so we're very excited about that. So, Steve, someone in the audience asks, what did the church publishers say when you brought Mark?
Oh, yeah. I feel so bad about this. The late Ken Arnold, who I considered a really dear friend at the end, he advocated, he was my champion all through this and Blinded, and he got fired about halfway through Blinded. I hope that it was something internal, but I don't actually know. If someone can assuage my guilt, that would be great. But it was very brave of the church of Ken to shepherd this through, because it got a lot of side eye, it wasn't easy and it wasn't painless.
May I actually help on this? I was working as an editor for church publishing when this book was in production. Can I take the mic and say? I know, where everything aligns. My past life, before I was ordained, and actually even in my early years of ordination, I was also an editor for church publishing. And so I remember sitting in the editorial meetings talking about Marked. And we should have coffee.
We should talk,
Maybe some wine. We'll do some wine. Actually, no, it was such an extraordinary concept. I remember everybody's minds just being blown. Everybody just being like, do we do this? But also understanding that there have to be these new ways of communicating the gospel, and that you had done it so faithfully. That people could argue about the mode, but they couldn't argue about the intent and how effective it was. And we actually had high hopes. We had high hopes. There were some who were like, you can't do this. But there were a number of us in the room who were like, this is a game changer, and made the case for Blinded as well when that was kind of coming through the system. So I couldn't actually wait. I didn't know how to write it down on a card, but just to thank you, because it really, Marked paved the way. Think 20 years ago. This was 20 years ago. Yeah. Publishing houses were nervous. They weren't sure what their future would be. The church pension group, which pays for, or it kind of owns church publishing, was watching the numbers. And so it was a risk, but we all agreed that it was a risk worth taking.
Thank you.
So thank you, Steve, for that gift then and now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, the Reverend Ken and Stephanie Spellers, with the inside scoop always. Steve, I really do love the imagination that you brought to all of the images. I mean, the idea of Jesus being baptized with this atomic drop, this power dunk, and then the devil scooting in like a sports agent in a limousine, and then Jesus the clown. And it strikes me that there's really an ancient tradition, really in the Jewish tradition of midrash, this idea of kind of scribbling imaginative interpretations around the margins of the literal scrolls and scriptures. And I think that's kind of what you were doing. I wonder how you, within yourself and perhaps with the publishers, how did you negotiate the boundaries of like how far can I stretch the creative interpretation?
Well, as I said earlier, this became personal for me. Remember 2004, we're neck deep in the Iraq War. And that really weighed on me heavily. And so, of course, it's that sort of idea of militaristic might and what does an oppressed and occupied people do. I pushed that a lot, and in retrospect, I'm kind of glad that Ken pushed back and said, "You're losing your focus. You're getting angry," which he appreciated, but he said, "Focus the anger. Don't just I'm mad at the war and I'm mad at the president. And I'm mad at this. Get back into the story." So there was a negotiation with my editor, and I'm grateful for that, actually.
Well, on that note, one parent of two sons out in the audience asks, do you have any theory about why adolescent boys seem drawn to draw dark, disturbing, and surrealist images?
Oh man, I don't think it's gendered. I think there's a phase that we all go through where we don't feel understood, and like I said before, drawing and images are under the radar. It's our first language as humans. We were drawing pictures of bison and buffalo way before we started codifying letters. Images are so important to be as a way to be understood. I mean, how many of you at like, you're trying to describe something to a friend and you grab a cocktail napkin and you draw a sketch on it and go, look, I think this is how it's going to work. That's in our DNA. We just draw. What's sad is we lose it. And I don't know if it's because we start to learn to read, but I think drawing is, like I said, in our DNA. And if you see a kid draw, lavish praise on them. I don't care whether it looks like it's supposed to look like. I don't care. The fact that they've got a thing in their hand, not a device, but a stick of charcoal or a pencil or a pen on a piece of paper or their skin, or they're drawing on it. And that's flourish. Just treasure that, because we need that. And if any of you, go, oh, I used to draw, but I don't anymore, stop it. Pick up a pencil, start drawing again. You don't have to show anybody, but God, please start drawing again. It feeds all of us.
Wow. Tell us about the front cover.
Oh, you mentioned this kid who drew dark and disturbing surrealist art. I wanted something that was not offensive. Subversive. I wanted a picture that didn't look like when I got this gig, there were a lot of comics out that were biblical, Bible-based, and they were just so careful and precious. And so I wanted to be the anti-precious comic. Again, that's why I chose to do something more like R. Crumb or Zap Comics instead of something like Marvel. I didn't want this. I wanted people to open this and go, WTF, what is this? As opposed to, oh, it's Jesus. Oh, it's Jesus. Oh, it's Jesus. So this was my image of, what am I getting into? Which I think is kind of the bumper sticker for all Christians is, what am I getting into?
Thank you. And is this actually the resurrected Jesus on the front with the marks, or?
I don't know.
All right. Well, we might do a Visio Divina on this someday.
Please, yeah. If someone
We'll
has
merge it.
someone has a better answer than I do about this cover.
I love it. Did you come away with a favorite story or scene in the Gospel of Mark, or?
Yeah. There's one. I forget. The famous guy whose daughter is dying. Yeah. My faith is not linear. I have good days and bad days, and my bad days, I don't believe at all. Like no, no. So his story is really resonant because it's really easy to be an atheist when things are going well. And then when someone gets sick or dies, it's hard. And I think that story really, it's one of my favorite stories that I drew, was this father realizing that he didn't have all the answers. And with his daughter dying and no one could explain it to him, Jesus comes along and just very simply says, wake up, get up. And it's like, it was that easy all along?
That's so beautiful. And I think about, when I think about like the gospel in comic book form, probably the first thing that comes to mind is kind of very fundamentalist tracts that, present a very simplistic black and white idea of, well, do these 5 things and believe in Jesus and your life will be great. But I love the way that this really brings so much black, white, and gray into the story, and makes room for the complexity of life. And
one of my favorite quotes is that the opposite. I forget who said this. The opposite of faith isn't doubt; it's certainty. And that's kind of been my. That was kind of that. I think I had that tacked on my wall as I was drawing this. Is go ahead and lean into the doubt. I find it very comforting that St. Thomas is still a saint. That to me, that's like, okay, you can doubt all you want. What is it? There's another character who said, "Save me from my doubt," or what is it? Yeah. I find that beautiful because that really, to me, that's my prayer.
Someone online notes that throughout the Christian era, humans have tried to depict Jesus. Do we have any idea who drew and or sculpted the first picture or image of Christ? And were the artist's images of Christ imaginative, cultural, passed on by the scribes?
That's a good question. I used to know the answer to this. The name Veronica came from Latin meaning the true icon, the true picture of Christ. And that became kind of a flashpoint in Christian history because there were some people, the iconoclasts, who said you cannot draw a picture of Jesus. And they tore they tore some of those beautiful mosaics to shreds because of that and they knew, like I said, images are tricky. So they said, let's not even deal with it. Let's just destroy all images of Jesus. I know that was a fairly early battle. The artists won out, yay. But it's still tricky,
Well, one little snippet of trivia that comes to mind is Felicity Harley McGowan is a professor at Yale and has done a lot of work around early Christian art. I don't know that it was the first depiction of Jesus, but the first known depiction of the crucifixion is something known as the Alexamenos graffito, found on a hill in ancient Rome on a wall. And it actually depicts a man worshiping a crucified donkey. And it was actually meant as an insult to kind of
sense.
mock Jesus and this whole idea of a crucified and resurrected God. And it also speaks to the inherently political nature of the gospel that I think you're marked so kind of beautifully, artistically revives. It's not a sterile, apolitical Jesus
No.
that you have there in Marked. I'm curious if you want to say anything more about the demons.
Oh, other than I love
Are
drawing.
the demons political?
Well, yeah, I actually think an oppressed people under a militaristic rule, there's a documented thing that happens to people who are oppressed where they start to turn the anger inward and they become sick just out of just that weight of people with guns pointed at them 24/7, and they start getting sick. Demons are those are demons, and it's the demons are also demons to me. I didn't show this in the book, but demons. The first part of Mark has Jesus exorcising tons and tons of demons, and he gets to a point where he stops. He drops off the cliff. He stops doing it, and I wondered why. Why not just keep healing people? I think Jesus realized that demons are a red herring. They make us look over there. Look, oh, there's a demon there's a demon. If we just get rid of that demon, everything will be fine. And he goes, no, they're inside us. That's where we have to look. And so he quit pointing over there and started pointing in here. And when you do this, you have to learn to, as Carl Jung would say, you have to learn to live with your demons, not throw them in the trash. They're part of us. And I think, does that kind of answer the question about demons?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a real movement within the mainline church right now and the Episcopal Church to really reclaim Jesus. And a pet project of mine, kind of crazy pet project, is I think we need to reclaim a robust demonology for the mainline church. We need to reclaim the devil, because I hear a lot of rhetoric about the devil from circles that also misrepresent Jesus and then use the devil indeed as a red herring to look the other way. So what advice might you give to aspiring young artists?
Draw all the time. I love what's going on here. I wish I could take a photo. Draw all the time. Be judicious in who you ask for a critique, because when you're young and the soft parts are exposed, people that you think know better than you can really hurt you. So be careful who you. I remember as a kid going, drawing something, being really proud of it, and showing it to my sister, and she went, To this day, I still remember it. It still hurts. So just draw because you love it, and maybe show people, maybe not for a while. Maybe just make it yours. I think that's it. Protect your gift.
Wonderful. Well, we're coming close to the end of our time together, but I wonder, you've done Mark, you've done the Acts of the Apostles. What might be next if you were to do a trilogy?
I don't know, but if Church Publishing is listening, give me a call. I am an illustrator. Artists do it because they love it. Illustrators do it because we have to pay rent.
Wonderful. Any final questions? Well, the man, the myth, the legend, the artist, the youth group
Thank you,
leader.
guys. I really appreciate you being here. Really.
Let's give it up for Steve Ross.
I love this.
Thank you all, and we'll see you next
Oh
week.
yeah, and if anybody wants any of this art, I'd rather not take it home. So. Thank you.
Awesome.